Welcome to Audiation in the Wild with your hosts, Beau and Eric Rasmussen. Season 5, Episode 5, The Pros and Cons of Music Notation, Part 2.
Okay, here we are.
Here we are again, Part 2, Notation, how bad it is. That's where we started last week. We're going to have to avoid everything we said last week.
I don't know how that's going to be possible.
It's not possible.
So, I guess first up, we stand corrected. Apparently, there are a group of people that have attempted or / are attempting to play The Rite of Spring from memory.
Yes.
Holy smokes.
We're down for that, though, right?
Oh, my God. Yeah.
I thought that was pretty good. Thank you. Thanks goes out to Patricia, I believe. Thank you, Patricia. In London.
Yeah, that's
London.
pretty wild.
I don't know how to say London. London. In an English accent. We should probably erase this part of the conversation. See, you can't write the accent down in notation, can you? In language. Well, you can approximate it, right? You can write this down in English, but you can't write English and English down very well. Can you do that?
Can't we just write swing equals like these eighth notes, but changed? Isn't that all it is?
Yeah. Well, you make notes, but it's not something you can do in notation. And how accurate is language when you're talking about the different kinds of swing? How many different kinds of swing are there?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so you got you got you got right? You got Can you audiate? How many kinds of swing can you audiate? I'm asking the audience.
Yeah. I've never personally counted, but
I have no idea. And
you know,
there's lots of jazz that doesn't swing, but go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I did want to say about notation that I've found incredibly useful in my own adventures is that notation can also be a super powerful tool for practicing, even when you can audiate the piece from memory and sing it from memory, because it gives you this visual window on what needs to be worked on. So from an instrumental and technical angle, even if you can audiate the piece, using it almost like as a whiteboard for getting a picture into like, okay, I could do that well, but I got to work on this. It can scaffold your thinking a little bit, and I think that is totally
that's totally excellent.
Powerful.
That's totally excellent, man. So here's the thing: like you have a goal, like this year I'm going to make $200,000 more, right? You can have that goal in your head, right? And you can do things that will help get you to that goal. But one of the first things people will tell you to do is write it down. You got to write it down because it puts it into existence in a way, right? So notation puts things into existence, right? In a way that doesn't have to live inside your audiation or inside your thinking or inside of your, capacities to create in your mind, right? That's kind of a cool thing to consider, because pieces don't become classics without having them written down very often, right? Or do they? Like folk songs, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It gets kind of deep when you really think about it.
Well, I guess that's another part of notation is often going to be looking at music from a certain type of perspective, certain Western perspective, especially if you're dealing with Western standard notation. There's obviously, I personally don't know a lot about this, but I'm sure there are other kinds of music notations that have existed throughout other cultures. I'm sure the, Western European mind wasn't the only system of notating notes and sounds. But one thing that related to something you were talking about a few minutes ago, notation we can't notate the accents very well. And I think what you're really getting at is there's a lot of things that notation can't capture. And related to that, notation makes you look like the Western notation that we typically use. Like I'm looking at a jazz etude in front of me on my computer right now. It makes you look at the music in a certain way. It highlights certain aspects of the music, but even that, like when I'm looking at a lead sheet, it has some chord symbols, has rhythms, and it has notes that go up and down. It's forcing me to perceive the music in a certain way. It forces me inside a certain conceptual box. And that may not be what music is all about. Those are elements of the music, and that's a specific way of looking at the music. But even when we just talk about, harmony, the music notation may be kind of encouraging us to look at music a certain way. And, related to this,
Do you mean like the stylization of how it's notated, or the...
Not even the stylization. Like, let me give you an example. So I get many students want to learn how to improvise and improvise over jazz changes and stuff like that. And when you look at a lead sheet, what do you see? Okay, you see, I'm looking at Solar. You see C minor major 7 for a couple bars, then G minor 7, then C. You get all these symbols coming at you, right? And so what do they make you do? They make you think of the harmony in a certain way, which is fine. We can audiate that. That's fine. But often I've seen the notation encourages people to conceptualize music as a bunch of notes that have to fit over the right chords. And often, I mean, you've probably experienced this, you're older than me, so you've seen this probably twice as much as I have. But when we teach people to improvise, I mean, when it's not done in an MLT way, it really can get off the rails. And a lot of times it's because people aren't thinking of making rhythmic statements or phrases. They're thinking of they're trying to play the right notes. Like, what's the Dizzy Gillespie quote? He's like, man, I just think of notes and I think of rhythms and put notes to it.
Put notes to it, yeah.
But notation, for example, it can encourage depending on who's reading it, for sure. And I think beginners, and like we talked about in the last episode, people who have maybe not brought audiation to the page, the notation can encourage you to hack the music up in a certain way that's not necessarily there. Like looking at individual notes, looking at not seeing phrases in the rhythms. I mean, some of my students don't see, sometimes I'll pull notation out with my students, a piece we're working on. Like, do you see the same motif is happening all over this first page? Like this rhythmic phrase is everywhere. And they may have not noticed that.
Yeah.
But it's just a funny commentary that it's almost like the medium changes the message. It can, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
It very much can. So, reading something, some people have an experience, they read a book, it's calming, it's quieting. Audiobook can be different experience than that. And, people are making the same claims about maybe watching a university lecture that's an hour long on YouTube is different than watching a bunch of TikTok videos that even talk about the same content. The medium can change the message because of the way our brains are interacting with it. And I think something like that happens with notation, for better or for worse, where we get divvied music inside a certain way of looking at it, and we don't realize how many students have you seen that, or just people that are fine at reading music, but they need to work more on their phrasing or their dynamics or something like that. And you can draw these symbols on the notation that reflect that.
There's people that bring musicianship and the right to the notation. The notation itself can't have all the expressive qualities. That's why Beethoven wrote so much language all over his scores, because there's so much that couldn't be said. Mm-hmm. In the notation, and speaking of the medium, I see the boy playing outside, right? That's you could have that with cutout cartoon Comic Sans cut out of a paper and pasted and put into your mailbox. And you come home late at night and you read that. It's like, that's weird. That's but in another context, right? So there's ways to express that. Maybe music notation should be all this, some kind of art quality to it. I don't know. I've never seen anything, but I just conjured up, I imagined something that might be interesting, right? Well, some of the 20th century notation, right? Or the 20th century notation where Cage and all kinds of people would write scribbles, and you had to interpret those scribbles however you wanted to, but they were still interested in form and sound and all that, but we weren't talking about tonalities anymore or rhythms.
Yeah.
You were outside that domain.
I think one of the most egregious things that exists in our current, whatever you want to call it, Western music notation. So there are no symbols that really highlight, like, along the way, what tonality you should be audiating. I think that's such a failure it's such a failure in just thought, because how many situations could be, I don't know, maybe brought to light if the composer was just like, right here, and we have a little symbol on bar 5. You're supposed to be audiating like E flat Dorian now. Go. And that would be good to have, I think, because sometimes it's not clear.
Why not?
To people.
Yeah, and it would change. It would change how you interpret the harmony and the weight and the weight and the flow of how you're expressing yourself through the harmony in that section, because Dorian's so cool with the 4 chord, that 4 chord is like key. If you don't have 4 chord, right? So that 4 chord, like, how do you land on that? It's going to be special compared, if the composer, right, is putting it in the place where it makes Dorian. Without the 4 chord, there is no Dorian, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of do it with a 2 chord, but it doesn't slap as hard, in my opinion. It's different in flavor, just like how in Dorian and Mixolydian, they both have this subdominant, and they also have a 5 chord, but they're subtly different.
Yeah.
But I think some people might say, well, we have key signatures, but it doesn't really.
That doesn't tell you tonality. That tells you that it's boiled down to 7 different, or actually 8, because laws twice if you consider Aeolian and minor different.
Yeah, I mean, if you open up that can of worms, there could be other ones.
Well, we're going to talk about Lydian sharp too, right?
It's really something else.
Yeah. So that's
or
cool.
melodic minor, melodic minor modes. There's standard things. These aren't necessarily like fringe cases. These are Lydian sharp 2 is more fringe, but the key signature.
Did you invent it though? That's the question.
I don't think I invented it. I think other people were doing it, but it's not common. But it definitely is harmonically very stable. Surprisingly.
Yeah, it's a cool one. How do you explain Lydian sharp 2? Well, you don't need to note. Let's just learn it by ear. Don't write it down.
That's the challenge. So maybe to play devil's advocate for notation, even in its like more raw form, let's take this Lydian sharp 2 example, right? We've used the example of going through the back door in terms of theory, right? So if you take Gordon's learning sequence, his proposed, theoretical learning sequence, just as a total thing, we have oral at the beginning. But I do think there's definitely examples of many musicians, I mean, Stravinsky being one, who would theoretically invent things and then teach themselves to audiate them along the way, right?
Right.
And Stravinsky flat out said, like, there's writings of him saying he would do this kind of thing. And the notation can be a useful bridge in the sense of like it can be a memory aid while you're giving birth to some of these ideas and to start mapping things out. But you still have to learn to audiate it, right? And that was my experience with the Lydian sharp 2 thing, where I kind of wrote some of this stuff down. I figured it out on the guitar, more top down theoretically. At that point, if you had asked me to sing stuff, I would have just said I can't audiate it yet. I know that. But through making recordings of myself playing it and singing along with stuff, I was able to learn how to audiate it.
Mm-hmm.
And you could use notation along the way to do that. And I think when it comes to, I don't think the same thing can be said rhythmically, and we can come back to this, but I think for certain harmonic things, once you've reached a certain harmonic like achievement level where you can audiate lots of harmonic stuff, you understand how the learning process works. And you could theoretically invent something, put it on notation, be decoding it, and then teach yourself to audiate it after.
Yeah.
Rhythm-wise, I don't think the same thing happens quite the same as harmonically. I think it's harder to teach yourself to audiate a rhythm you can't hear an example of.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had never thought of that.
But harmonically, I think you can get away with this. And so rhythmically, I mean, you could use notation software that can play. You know, if you can't audiate a certain polyrhythm, you could kind of force it into your ear like that.
Yeah. So when you open up the the box that is notation software, and you can add flavors to it, right? You can tell it to swing, but then you have to adjust that swing proportion as the tempo goes down or up, right? As it gets faster or slower. So that's one thing. But you can put in the perfect rhythm, right, and have the program play back what you put in perfectly. Where is the music? It's not there.
It's not necessarily there, but it could be a useful tool. Like I made some kind of aural stuff with like quintuplets, eighth notes, quintuplets, 16th notes, like quintuplets into all kinds of random stuff.
Yeah.
And at least it was getting me in the aural direction, right?
Yeah.
So I made this file, and then I just exported it from my notation software and walk around and sing with it. And that's actually proven to be useful, I think.
Teach yourself conical. Get put on a YouTube video. Dom, di, tom, nan. Dom, di, da, dan. Right? And then get to where they do the 5 against 1, the 7 against 2, all the different syllables that you do, 9 against 2, or whatever. It's cool stuff. And I don't know if I could learn that in notation. I think it would only be oral for me. But it's simultaneously that and verbal association, I suppose, because you are putting syllables to it from the get-go. You're not learning the rhythms and then adding syllables. And there, the syllables are meant to be sounds, not symbols. They're representative of the sound that you would play if you were to play a drum. So you want your mouth to be the drum, your throat and your mouth to be
it's a
the
really
drum.
interesting...
So it's a sound. So it's really a sign, not a symbol.
Yeah.
And notation is this. That's a good distinction for people. The difference between sign and symbol, right? That's music learning theory 102. Like, that's really cool stuff. You get in, like, the notation represents something that needs to already be in your head. So it's a symbol. And I'm not lucid enough. I've had an off day, and I can't. I don't think I can come up with it with the top of my head. I haven't talked about it or thought about it even in a long time. But a sign is explicit, and a symbol's you've got implicit stuff you've got to take from it, or you got to bring meaning to it, rather.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You've got to impose other things. And that's really kind of cool.
It is cool. Even as, and I was kind of getting at this before when I was talking about like lead sheets, could be jazz lead sheets or pop tunes or whatever. I mean, even chord symbols I would include as part of our notational system, like just representing, C minor, major 7, or whatever.
Sure. You could look at a chord symbol and audiate.
Yeah.
Audiate, in several different ways. So, a C,
sure.
C7 sharp 9, C7 sharp 9 aren't all the same. There's ways to voice that. And my great jazz buddy plays in Philadelphia. Jim Holton, shout out to him. I've spent so many hours talking music with him. What a great musical mind he's got. And he sat me down and maybe put on the headphones and listen to Oscar Peterson for the first time. So it's like he's a friend. Wow. He's my friend forever. It made me sit down and put the headphones on. You're going to listen to this. And it was just the trio. And my God, I lit up back, I was a teenager. Jeez, 18 in college.
Oh, you've known him for that long. Wow.
Yeah. And,
okay.
But when he looks at at chords, he thinks voice leading almost exclusively.
Sure. Oh yeah.
He's got to have voice leading in relationship to the melody or in relationship to the soloist that he's accompanying or relationship to his own solo if he's playing. So he's a jazzer, and some of his stuff is just exquisite. There's times where I enjoy listening to him because I know him really well. I enjoy him more than I enjoy Bill Evans at times. It's like because he just know him, and so when he tricks you, it's that much more cool or surprising or like I knew you were going to go there, and then he didn't.
Well, and what you were just saying about his reaction to chord symbols is related. Them. Yeah, and it's related to what you were saying before about symbols, where because of his deep wells, spring of meaning, when he looks at C minor to F minor, he has a lot of associations between how to get from C minor to F minor that someone else looking at C minor to F minor that knows them in like root position, they're not having the same experience.
No.
Right? It's all this background knowledge that he has on the keyboard and in his audiation and in the context of the song and in the context of the, the key and the tonality and stuff.
Right.
It's all influencing how he interprets the symbol. Yeah. And,
so notation is not limited, but it's limiting.
Yeah, it could be. It could be for sure. It's funny. Some of my students, I've encouraged them to, okay, let's take a lead sheet and let's make a couple copies of it, and I'm going to make you separate copies of it that have chord changes, like not just chord changes, like hey, watch me for the changes, like changes to the chords.
Yeah,
and it's interesting to see. Some people when they see C minor, it really makes them think different things. Like a lot of jazz musicians think G minor when they see C minor. They're just picturing putting a G minor on top of it.
Yeah.
And those things aren't necessarily
just adding the 7/9 to it.
Exactly. Yeah. But those things are not necessarily. It's not like you can't do that without the notation. But
Sure.
when you see the notation, do those thoughts get triggered? Do those audiation ideas come to mind?
So I'm going to bring back before we. Wind this down, this language analogy. I was thinking just a little while ago in the car that think of all the spoken language, I don't know how you quantify it, but it's like the number of syllables,
The number of words spoken per day.
and the amount of books that are written per day, like what's written down and what's spoken, like the relative proportion. Like, and it can even consider the internet being written down because it's notated. And then, would music do better if we had that same proportion? Like the amount of music we make per day and have so little of it written down. If we were all to be musicians on the street corners all day long and talk in the same level that we talk to each other all day,
Mm-hmm.
and how much of that language do we need to write down, and how much of it is just better not. And then with music, it's only when it's good do we write it down.
I mean, I'm pretty glad Bach wrote some stuff down.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah. And
There's probably a bunch missing
and
that we don't know
Shakespeare,
about.
right? Put
Yeah.
Bach and Shakespeare in the same boat, right?
Yeah.
The creativity. So, I don't know. Does that help wind things up or tear it down? Wind things down or tear it up?
Yeah, maybe we'll revisit in this topic in the future when we have Ron on. Love to hear his thoughts
Yeah,
too.
Ron.
But yeah, I mean, I think in general people need to be singing and moving more, whether they have the notation or not.
We might allow Ron back on.
Yeah.
No, he's got commitments, man. But yeah, let's do it again.
Okay, till next time.
Thanks, man.